Welcome everyone back to this is actually, I think, your first time doing this. This is a Maindeck deep dive into our competitive Grand Archive deck choice, just coming back from Ascent Santa Clara. This is a video that I think you should watch after you've watched our deck profile on the deck that we brought to Ascent Santa Clara. There were 10 Maindeck team members there. I think that's the number 10. 8 of whom brought this list and 2 of whom chickened out and brought a different deck the day of. But 8 of us brought the Watermill Arisanna list. I think all of us running the same list. There were maybe a couple that had some different sideboard cards, but otherwise it was, I think we were all doing the Dual Spirit, Fractured and regular, or Fragmented and regular Spirit of Water. And of course, as hopefully you guys all know, here with us we have Mitch, Maindeck Mitch, who took first place at Ascent Santa Clara with this list. Yes, congratulations.
Ooh, we did it.
And holding up the other end of the payout is Maindeck Taylor, who took 15th at the event as well. So congratulations, Taylor. That was awesome as well.
Well, thank you.
And then just a shout out as well. He's not here, but Kinship from the Maindeck team took 11th as well, just missing out on Top Cut. And I think, Taylor, you and I are going to talk about my placement in the upcoming podcast and what went into that.
I'm sure there will be words about this. Yes.
There was an unfortunate incident with the recording of round results, so I did not end up making day 2. But we'll talk about that plenty, or hopefully not too much, actually, in the upcoming podcast. But anyway, I think those are the main placements that we had with this list. And so, like I mentioned, we have that deck profile video that's going to go into the details. So if you want to know what the list is about, we'll have it up on screen here just for reference. But if you wanted me, I'll dig into the list for you and explain some of the card choices, what they do, what the goal of the list is, everything there. The purpose of this video is to go a step deeper, assuming you kind of understand that. And we're going to talk about how we decided on this list for the event, why we brought this compared to other lists. And then we're going to talk a little bit about just like matchups throughout the day, performance, and especially hear from Mitch about his thoughts on this list after he swept the tournament with it, of course. So that's enough of my yapping for now. I'm going to probably just chime in later, but I'm going to let Taylor take the lead. Taylor kind of takes the role sometimes as the captain of the team a little bit in preparing for these major events. So he has I think, great insight to start talking about. Taylor, why and how did we decide on taking Watermill Arisanna to Santa Clara? Taylor, take it away.
Yeah. So, oh no, one moment. I got so excited I disconnected my headphones. We're back. Okay. So, yeah, it was about like a week after Ascent Christchurch. We were kind of waiting to see kind of where the meta was after the 3 visits errata from Toronto. And that was kind of my ideal time to start looking at the meta, what we were going to have to like expect going into Santa Clara and start figuring things out. And the only thing I could really tell is that like the meta was very much like wide open at that point. There were a lot of decks performing really well. You had Allies making a comeback. You had Razor Gale still seeing a lot of success with Kong Ming. You had Slimes obviously still doing very well. Nico was on their eyes. Like there was just a lot of decks that were kind of all over the place as far as archetypes are concerned. And so I just really was struggling to figure out where to start attacking the metagame from and like kind of where we wanted to hang out. We started looking at like some allies lists, and we had talked a lot about like wind being like a really cool way to kind of attack this metagame. As evidenced by like Razor Gale, Kong Ming still doing really well. And I was browsing through lists on Fractal Insight, all of our favorite site here, to just get some inspiration and see what, like, if there was anything that stood out as something that was really, popping out as a winner. And after the first few regionals, looking back at the Christchurch results, there was 2 lists that stood out as very unique from Christchurch, taking 20th and 27th place, and like the only 2 lists at Christchurch, I think, of this specific archetype, and it was Watermill Arisanna. And that struck me just as like, okay, there's something here, I think, because it's only these two pilots. They both finished top 32, made day 2 with this. Like, I think we have some room to play. And the interesting thing is that both lists were very different. So like one of them had 4 Frostborn Paladins main, like you would expect. Bunch of other cool like floating memory stuff. The floating memory package is pretty similar between the two lists because there's only so many water floating memory. But then the second list just completely cut Frostborn Paladin. They played Rime Soul Bishop instead. Played 4 Revitalizing Cleanse, 4 Perfect Repulsion. So just a bunch of like really cool cards. I think in hindsight as well, I think this is actually the list that True Champion Gaming had put up on like a Patreon video beforehand.
Yeah, we found that out later. We went and looked at their Patreon. Like, oh, hang on, this was posted just before Christchurch, and it looks like this player just said, "Well, this will make me a true champion," and then took it and then day 2'd with it, which is sweet.
Absolutely, yes. And then meanwhile, the 20th place list. A fair bit different than that. I think it's a little bit more similar. There's been a player that's been playing this in NA for a while as well, basically since AMB came out, Chessie. They have been putting a lot of work into this as well. Like when we were looking at results and stuff leading up to the tournament, their name was always popping up on this list. And they also have a slightly different take on it too. And they placed, I think 13th at Santa Clara as well. So they also did well. So this was just like an excellent meta call turned out, which was we love to see.
We were chatting a little bit with Chessie at Santa Clara, like both kind of during the whole ceremony section a little bit. And just shout out to Chessie for kind of innovating this list. Like, I don't think we would have brought this. I would bet a lot of groups would not, who did bring it, would not have brought this if not for Chessie kind of pushing the limits of the list a little bit before this. And then everyone just kind of took it and started to refine it and taking their own directions as well.
Yep. Yeah. So definitely not an original deck idea on our end as far as coming up with a list, but we definitely identified that this is kind of, this is something to look at anyway. And then we didn't really have any other kind of big candidates for a deck to take yet. We were still 2.5 weeks out from Santa Clara, so we had some time. It was pre-Thanksgiving still, so we were just kind of jamming games at that point. We're getting some like Win Tristan games in. We thought that would be a good choice. We were getting some mill games in, and we were just seeing like the mill deck had like a lot of explosive draws. There's a lot of games that just like Icebound Slam into Stratagem can win, Icebound Slam into Double Polar Depths, Double Polar Depth Stratagem. You just have like a lot of high rolls that you just get free wins on your opponent if they aren't respecting the deck at all. So we ran with this deck quite a bit, like. Up until actually like the week of like the Monday of, Mitch was very much like, I'm going to play some slimes. If we find something that's better, awesome. I'll hop on. But like I've got my deck. I'm ready to go. Which was fine. Cause like, I don't think Mitch had a ton of time to prepare for the tournament anyway. So like, it was good that he had like something in his back pocket ready to go. Meanwhile, the rest of us, we spent a lot of time jamming games on TTS, getting, just honing in the list, seeing if it actually had like what it takes, what it can beat down, what it loses to. And by the time like the Monday before the tournament rolls around, we're all like, yeah, no, this is real. Like this has got legs. Like we had started refining it to the point where we knew cards that we wanted to include, cards that we did not think were worth. And so we were, I think all of us locked in at that point.
We went through some interesting cooking iterations. There was a point where I had put a little bit too much coriander into the stew or something, and there was a brief, like about a day, where there was a level 3 Arisanna that was floating around in the list to potentially like get some cosmic bolt action with or something, and then we pulled back and we're like, no, wait, we like never, ever need to do this.
I want to reiterate on that or just like point that out some more, because we also at the time had misremembered the text on Dusklight Communion. So we're like, oh, this is great because we can also use this as another out to get -1 level for slimes.
Right.
But
we
actually
flipped around
Astra
the Umbra
does not.
and Astra.
Astra instead destroys a Fantasia. We did not have an Umbra card to actually give -1 level. So yeah, beyond never going to 3 anyway, we were just like, actually, no, this plan, nothing about this plan works.
Hey, it could kill a Fracturized Lantern.
It could
You
kill
know what,
Fracturized
though?
Lantern.
Like, that is a potential innovation going forward that might be something to look at. But
well, I mean, that is the 27th place list from Christchurch was playing Communion and an Astra card specifically, I would assume, for Fracturized Lantern in the sideboard. It turns out I don't think actually the decks that can Fracturize Lantern against you are not going to pressure you very much anyway. So you don't need to worry about it too much. And so you completely forego it. But I mean, Fracturizing Lantern is kind of the right way to attack this deck, because we talked a lot about it being like a water erupting.
yes.
It's like, except it has an even better like control plan. You can play the long game really well because you're dumping a bunch of floating memory into your graveyard through like Fractal of Rain. You can even just pop a Polar Depths for value, and then you can play a Lost in Thought for 4 or 5, draw 5 cards or more. Even like it's not uncommon to. Well, it's fairly uncommon to play it for more, but like you have the potential to play it for just a ton. And now all of a sudden you've got like a 15 card hand. And how do you lose the game at that point? Like it's so impossible when you have all the tools water does. And you even have like revitalizing cleanses to gain, 11 or more life. Like it's insane.
The thing that really got me like on this deck in that testing process, there's a couple of weeks you mentioned where we had sort of these daily sessions. It would be a couple different people usually every day. It's sometimes rotating, but there would be just a bunch of days where there was just like an 8-hour session just on the on our competitive Discord of just people in TTS kind of grinding games, talking, swapping seats. And we saw so much power from this deck being laid out there, where we to the point where, like, number one, we never found a matchup where we were like, oh no, this is you just lose this. This is bad. It could always win, which we were like, okay, well, that's important. And importantly, I guess I want to mention too, this is a list we took for this meta specifically, and the decks we tested were ones we expected to see in the meta at Ascent Santa Clara specifically. And what I really am getting at with that is that there are ways to disrupt this deck. There are ways to slow this deck down. There are like this Fracturized Lantern that we expect people to start to respect a little more going into the meta, because we're now seeing like regional results coming out of the meta where now people know about this deck, and you're seeing in Fractal Insight, you look at that head to head, you see a lot of green boxes for this deck at those events, which is exactly what we were experiencing. Like we actually set out and said, we're going to play a deck that has at least a 60-40 into slimes, at least a 60-40 into allies. Those were the two decks we were the most concerned about going into Ascent Santa Clara. And then everything else, we needed to not have like too many massive problem decks. And we ended up with a deck that had, I think, pretty cleanly 60-40 or higher into both of those two.
Oh, I think 60-40 is very conservative for the allies matchup. Like the wind allies especially.
For wind, it's just unwinnable, I think, on their end. It's just they had to high roll so hard. The wind, foothold.
Yeah, the water has a little bit more of a chance, a little bit more potential, but even now we're seeing the head-to-head come out for that on the regionals too, the big regionals, like the 173, 199 player regionals, and it ain't looking good for ally decks if you're going into a meta with this deck in it. And then the rest of those matchups, we were like, none of these are bad. Actually, like, I would much rather be on Water Ari into Nico than be in a mirror match there. I feel better about that matchup. And then just like down the line, like Fire Aggro, like easy matchup for this deck we found the whole weekend. And all of that is really because this is a control deck that has like massive combos that it could sometimes just spike out on turn Mitch turn 3. And
sometimes you win turn 2, all right?
Or turn 2, yep. But otherwise, it had all of the tools. Like Taylor said, when you have to go late, it's hard for other decks to beat the deck that plays a card Lost in Thought that just says draw 5. And that was our game plan going in for all of our like discussion, our kind of teamwork and planning for the event. It was, okay, you're in a matchup, like you're in a mirror match or something, and it's going late. Don't just toss away your Lost in Thought. Hold on to a Lost in Thought. If you can't string a Polar Depths combo together, Lost in Thought for 5. Because once you Lost in Thought for 5, you can kind of push through just about anything. You can eat all your float up and you will get it back. Once you have a like 13 card hand, you will find a way. It's not that hard to do to set up a new stratagem afterwards. And the deck just was so robust. It could do this erupting combo stuff while also just like all of its control pieces added to the combo. You play, I had so many people, I don't know about you guys, I had so many people at Santa Clara reading Torrential Blast for the first time.
Yeah, there's a few of those.
And that card is cracked in the deck. It is delete target threat and also mill 2, and it puts itself, obviously puts itself in the yard, but that's good for you too, right? It's crazy.
Torrential Blast was an all-star for sure. Like it does everything you want the deck to do. But yeah, I mean, being able to play a control game that just wins the game on the spot if you let your guard down is so powerful. Because like your opponent has to pressure you and they have to like try and break through your defenses at some point in order to actually win the game. And if they like put too much pressure on you to where they've let their guard down, all of a sudden you just get to win. If anybody played like modern Magic the Gathering modern format circa like 2012, 2014, and you played against Splinter Twin, this is essentially just Splinter Twin. Like
it kind of
where
is, yeah.
Like after a certain turn, if your opponent taps out, puts all their cards in memory, they lose the game if you have the combo in hand. And there's like multiple combos, right? Like you can mill your opponent with Fractal of Polar Depths. You can mill yourself, empty your deck, and then hit them with a stratagem for 1 million damage. You can just like do some, damage over time with Frosthorns and Icebounds. Like there's a lot of ways to just pick up the win in this deck, and you have a lot of ways to pressure your opponent as well to like force them into bad plays.
Yeah, I mean, Frosthorn Paladin aggro is not something that should be underestimated. We also ran, of course, the Claymore, which provided just I'd say like less often than the other kills it came out, but when it could come out and just be like, well, I don't have stratagem, I don't have Polar Depths, but I do have 15 damage on this one card, which when combined with a few Frosthorn Paladin swings, or the big thing you can get people with too was the actually hang on, my refracting missiles are super lethal when I toss 2 of them at your face, and now I only need 2 more float in the yard and stratagem kills you right now. So it could string all of that together. Another important point to mention, Polar Depths had the only counterplay to Polar Depths that exists is a nullifying lantern in play, and really only if it's in play before your Polar Depths is out and you're a cleric, because otherwise when the opponent attempts to materialize nullifying lantern, even if you have like 4 cards in yard, it still is a massive gain to just go, okay, fine. In response, I'll Polar Depths myself, mill 5 more, and hey, look, there's 3 float, and now like suddenly I'm like, I can Lost in Thought for 5, or I have a lethal stratagem, or your opponent has to respect your deck really early on, get that nullifying lantern down, fracturize it if they are water, because even if they don't fracturize it, we have so many ways to kill lantern. We at least have one main way to kill lantern, which is the mirror. Sorry, not so many ways, but you have the way to kill the lantern
there whenever you need to grab it.
Yep. And you just have to set the Fantasia up, and then that's not terribly hard either. We'll talk a little bit, I'm sure Mitch will talk a little bit about especially the choice between Spirit of Water and Fragmented Spirit of Water. It was very intentional, obviously, that we ran both of them, and we had a whole kind of game plan for when you materialize either spirit. But it had the out to nullifying lantern, and then otherwise some of my opponents played nullifying lantern, but they wouldn't play it till late in the game, and it didn't matter at that point then anyway. And even if I didn't have Polar Depths out, late in the game, you can just stratagem anyway. Lantern doesn't do anything to the stratagem kill. It only stops the Polar Depths. I think one thing we'd like to see in the game to interact with this is some way to interact with activation of abilities. Currently, there's very little in the game that says anything about activated abilities, and nothing that deals with sacking a Polar Depths. And that's maybe a missing point of interaction in the game currently, just to make sure that stuff like this isn't so completely non-interactable as it was, which is why we took the list.
Well, okay. It's still pretty interactable. Like the problem is no one wanted to play interaction for it, right? Like we just talked about how there was a lot of players who's not playing Lantern, and so that's makes things much easier for this deck. But as soon as your opponent is like playing Lantern and they're like, I'm going to respect this deck and I'm going to play this turn too. Now all of a sudden you've got to do real work, right? And then if you're a win deck, right, you can't just play your Polar Depths out for free like in the early game, because if they're playing Scatter Essence, all of a sudden like they're getting a huge advantage by getting a free Scatter Essence on it and having floating memory. And of course, Mystic Purifier, new card from Mortal Ambition, same thing, which is something any deck can play. It's norm. I only ran into one Mystic Purifier the whole tournament, and that was my round 12 opponent, Sebastian. And that was it. Like nobody else threw it down. Well, no, actually, that's not true. There was a Eddie, I think one of my opponents from day one was playing Fireman. I think he had Mystic Purifier as well. But that was it. I know
Killidus got me with them out of the side. Killidus had them in Water Allies. And I felt like was prepared to respect this kind of deck, or at least mill decks in general. And I guess I just want to say that I meant really just, I would like in the game to see some ability interaction in general. I think that's just a missing point of interaction in the game, something that could be useful. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree. There were some people who were respecting it, but not enough with what we do have. And I expect to see cards like Cleansing Reunion start to creep into play a little bit as well, because if even the Lantern isn't great when I already have a Yard and a Polar Depths out, but if I try to crack Polar Depths and you Cleansing Reunion 6 cards out of my Yard, even if I have a pretty stacked Yard, it really reduces that impact.
Yep. That's huge.
I ran into so many Mystic Purifiers that day, I think.
Oh, really?
Ooh.
I think only like 4 of my opponents the entire day didn't have Mystic Purifier.
Wow. Well,
I know
you really went through the gauntlet then. Holy cow. Jeez.
Duckhats didn't have it. Sean didn't have it. I think 1 or 2 of the other Slimes didn't have it, but I had Slimes that were packing in their sideboard. I had the Water Diana player that was in the main board.
All right. Okay. So Mitch was able to fight through all of this. Dan, what's our excuse? What happened here?
I am worse than Mitch. That's my. I don't know about you, Taylor. You probably should have been in the top 8 too, but I am worse than Mitch. That's my excuse. No, but like I think that's a great testament to why we took this deck, why it was so powerful, because Mitch can fight through a field of Mystic Purifiers and still win the Ascent, right? So it's even when you Mystic Purifier the Fractal of Rain early on, it hurts, but it doesn't kill you. Like you said, Taylor, we did do a lot of we had a lot of discussion, going in about play lines, and we definitely had a mantra too, where if they're playing Wind, you are not putting down the Polar Depths until you're a Cleric. You can't possibly just risk it. You need to at least have the ability to pop it in response to the Scatter, Purifier, or Vertigus Decree in order to get some value out of it before you can just throw it out there. Otherwise, if you lose a Polar Depths, that hurts a lot.
That's really rough. Yep, that's a huge swing. Thankfully, it's pretty obvious too when decks are playing Scatter Essence. If they're not going to level 3, they're likely not playing Scatter Essence, so they're going to have to rely on Vertigus Decree or Mystic Purifier. So you can kind of sniff that out a little bit. A lot of Allies decks aren't playing Decree either, or if they are, it's coming out of the board. So I expect that to change going forward, specifically because Fantasia Hate is very important now. But like, if you are playing a match and it's game 1 and you think that they aren't going to have it, like maybe you want to start risking that play. If you are worried about that, or sniff it out at all, hold them back until you need it. And then Polar Depths is an excellent just card to play the turn you need it as well, because it basically costs 2 that turn instead of 3, since it can reserve to play whatever you're playing next anyway. So definitely be a little bit more careful than necessary with it if you're worried about removal.
Yeah. So with all this discussion about what we were playing against and who was beating us, but also who we were beating, I think it's a great opportunity to turn this over to Mitch and have Mitch just Mitch, why don't you just walk us through your experience with the deck, and also from the lens of you were going to play Slimes until a I don't know, the day before.
The day before right is when I committed to it. Yeah.
Well, the day before you were like ready to play like that Monday, I think, right? Like you hadn't locked in yet, but you were like, okay, I'm going to make sure I have these cards ready to go.
Yeah, he didn't commit, but he knew we were on some sauce, right?
Yeah, and exactly.
Yeah, the first time I played against the deck, I was like, "Damn, this deck has gas."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we were on the right track too. Like, just want to point out quick before we move on that True Champion Gaming also played this list. Caven and Terry both showed up with it. Also, Cactus and Matt G both showed up with it, and there were a couple other players as well. So like.
When we saw the room of the other players playing this, we were like, okay, we figured something out.
Yeah. We missed the boat on Vanitas for Toronto, but we got it here, and that felt good. So
that felt like really good company to be in. Like if you show up with the same deck as Matt G, Cactus, and True Champion Gaming, you're like, okay, I did something right.
Yep, we got it. So.
Okay, so anyway, Mitch, why don't you can start on day one and just talk about your matchups. We'd love to hear, I think, about your successes, your struggles, what you were good against, what was a little tougher for you, and then your day two was frankly epic in several ways. I don't use that word lightly, very overused word, but it was truly a remarkable day two, and we got to hear about that as well. But let's start day one.
We'll go over day two here in a little bit. But yeah, day one. So I ended day one. I think it was 9 rounds. Day one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
You were 6-2-1.
Loss. Yeah, 6-2-1.
Mm-hmm. So
because
I was also 6-2-1.
Yeah, we went like real close together. Like, don't play against him again.
I was too, kind of.
You were. You were. No, so that first day I played against 4 different slime opponents. One of them beat me. The other ones took care of them.
Were they all norm?
I think they were all norm on day one, yeah.
I didn't realize that you also played 4 slimes day one.
Yeah, so right away, out of the gate, round one, play against Sean. First round.
Oh, that's such a tough first round. Oh my God.
I was like, okay, here we go. Gotta lock in right away.
No warm-ups for Mitch.
No warm-ups. So we're just going the distance. So what I lost against day one, I lost against the Slimes player. Slime's doing slime things.
Sometimes they still get you.
Yeah. I mean, you went 75% against Slimes on the day. That's got to be good, right?
I mean, I will definitely take that any day of the week. I also lost to Ansem or Kildis on his Water Allies list.
Kildis took a few of the main deck team members out.
Like he just ran through 3 of us, right?
Yeah, it was really funny. I played him round one. And yeah, I was like, I don't know. He just got me. He's like, I got him game one.
He just got me. But then
he brought in the purifiers and just, I don't even, let's say one of those things where the game just ended. We're like, I lost, huh? I don't even know what happened here. I got run over.
Got him game 1, game 2, and 3. I was like, oh, I'm dead.
Yep.
All right. And then I had my draw was against the level 3 water Diana player.
Mm-hmm.
That was a time draw or an intentional draw?
Time draw.
That's right. I'm remembering the day now.
We were in game 3 going into time. I had been close either way. I was close to dying, but I had lethal setups.
Mm-hmm. I played them day 2, and we went to time as well in game 2. So that's a grind of a matchup when you get a water.
And then he was running the 2 main deck Mystic Purifiers as well. That's what got me in game 2 of that.
Oof.
Big oof. But yeah, one more sideboard bringing 2. He was ready.
It's good to see. It's good to see that respect, though. Like again, that's what is going to have to change going forward. So if you're like watching this video to take notes, so you can take this to the next Ascent you go to, Utrecht, Melbourne, Seattle, something. I mean, I expect to see a lot more people. Again, I just want to reiterate that teching against this. It's going to be. It won't take long before it's going to be a tougher road for this deck. Although I think it's still a very potent deck.
Yep,
I agree.
Yeah, you also beat 2 Wind Allies, right?
Yep, we're getting there next. Yeah. So we played against 2 chess club members. They were like Noel and OKH Business.
Burner.
Burner, yeah.
Yep.
Noel and Burner. They were on the exact same list between the two of them, so not anything different there. But yeah, the Wind Allies match just didn't feel like a real game.
It doesn't for this deck.
If they don't have an early rush to close out the game, like on turn 2 or turn 3, it's pretty much they just can't win at that point.
Yeah, I played them. I didn't play them. I played a Wind Allies player round 8 on stream as well, and both games felt very decisive. Where you level early. If you find any action at all, you just get to level early. You get to activate Polaris for free, and then you get to wipe their board, and they can't really do anything about it.
Nope, they really can't.
Yeah, I can't stress how it seemed crazy that Ari would be the choice for this, but Ari is really like the control champion now, because Ari is the only champion that basically says on her face, like on her card, effectively, if you count Polaris as part of it, she says, wipe the board. She's got a board wipe built in to her kit that no one else has access to. I don't even like the gather is now secondary to me to her having Polaris when I'm like thinking about what champion should do what. So if you're building a control deck, like the first thing you should think is, well, I need a reason to not play Arisanna, because having a board wipe for 2 to whatever amount of damage based on how you build the deck is huge.
Yep.
So day 1, Mitch, let's see, you had 4 slimes. We had 2 wind allies. We had the water Diana and the water allies. What's the last one?
What was the last one? We gotta pull up here.
You played against Matt G in round 5 in the mirror.
Oh yeah, the mirror match. Yeah.
Mirror. How's the mirror for this, guys? How do you guys feel about the mirror?
God, I don't like it at all.
The mirror is pretty rough. Actually, I think our deck is not anywhere nearly as well suited to the mirror as True Champion and Matt and Cactus's lists were as well, because I think True Champion was also running Rhymesoul Bishop, but Cactus and Matt definitely were. And that card puts in a lot of work in the mirror.
So I would agree with that, but I think Matt and Cactus's list wasn't as good for the mirror because they don't have any Parchment Paladins at all.
Oh, yes. Yeah, they were missing that. Yeah. The problem with not having Rhyme, like, for having Frostborn's awesome, but not having Rhymesoul just really is rough, because, like, that thing hitting you for 2 every turn is a lot, and you really are disincentivized to kill it because you don't want to give them the floating memory from it either.
Yep.
And meanwhile, it's also like, just a perfectly fine card to dump in the yard off of any of your mills too. So like it helps kind of keep your floating content high while still like being a perfectly playable card in that matchup. And just gives them another like point of interaction, another point like of pressure to apply to you that we didn't necessarily have. So, having Frostborn, I think, and them not having it made up for it a lot. But like, I played against Caben round 4 in the mirror as well, and I could tell, like, having Rhymesouls would have been really cool. They weren't playing Rhymesouls either, which was very helpful too. But like that card just does so much work in the mirror.
I played an adjusted version of our list in the Scrub Out event the next day, and did quite well. I ended up 9th. The last round was a little wonky, unfortunately. My loss was to Logan from our team, who was on Razorgale, and that guy just rips Razorgales I'm not joking. We played 3 games. I actually won one of them, but in every single game, double Razorgale. At the start of the one of them was 3 Razorgale. I'm like, okay, I can't beat that. That's
no, you can't.
But that was insane. And then I beat up on a bunch of fire aggro decks, had a really sweet game against Deegis. That was really fun. And then the last round had a couple, took a long time to actually gain control of the first game, and then lost control and lost it. And then we were just taking super long. I was trying to play fast. I made a play mistake, and I just didn't want to call a judge again. I just conceded. I'm like, I'm just not, like, whatever. So that last round was a little scuffed for me. I definitely played a little sloppy towards the end. But otherwise, the adjustments to the deck, I put in Rhymesouls over the cows, which I think I mentioned in the deck profile video as well as something we changed. And then to respect the mirror a little more, expecting to see maybe a few of the people playing it now at the Scrub Out event. I brought in the Viridian Protective Trinket into into the main. I cut the other spirit and just said, whatever, I just want Trinket instead. Which I know is that is there's like a civil war within Maindeck about which spirits should be used.
Yep.
And what's funny is both True Champ and Matt and Cactus run different spirits.
Yes.
Yep.
So there's not even
And we were on both.
Yeah.
we're both.
So
We're in the middle ground.
Yeah, there's still like a lot of iteration that can be done with this deck, and it's still like pretty flexible, I think. So like you can tune it for how you want. So I would say even if like hate starts appearing for this deck, like I would say it's not dead in the water at all, pun intended.
No, I don't think so.
So but yeah, let's jump into day 2 here, Mitch. Because
Day 2. So day 2 was such a fun day.
I bet you had a great day.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a really good day for you, actually, Mitch.
Yeah, I can't complain with the results, but it was just back to back to back to back to back. It was slimes all day. Slimes, nothing but slimes.
It was not back to back to back to back to back to back. It was actually just back to back to back, and then a break, and then back to back.
Sure,
to back.
yeah. Me and Caven had an ID in top 8.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it was 6 rounds of slimes.
It was you played.
There was
slime,
at least
slime,
some
slimes.
fire slimes, so we had some variation there.
Mm-hmm.
Slimes draw with Caven.
Yep.
Slimes win the tournament. It was like
that's the day. That's right there.
Yep. That was the day. If anyone is out there thinking, man, nothing can beat slimes, I have the deck for you.
Oh,
I really do.
Boy, do I! Yeah. So I was 9 out of 10 against slimes this weekend.
Yeah, that's such a crazy result.
It's wild because I had the complete opposite weekend. I played slimes once the whole weekend, and that was it.
Did you beat it?
I did beat it.
Yeah, there we go. 100%. You're better than me on slimes.
Yep. Better against slimes than Mitch is, obviously.
There we go.
I think it was like 50-50. I think I played it twice and I won one and lost one or something.
Yeah.
So
bring down the average.
Terrible.
Oh.
I'm terrible.
I mean, the thing about slimes is like it still has its high rolls as well, and its high rolls are very good. So if you don't have like negates ready for their level 3 turn to really slow them down, they can run over you if they've got like Ethereal Storm or something like that. So it's still like I would say it's favorable for mill, but I would say like there's still just gonna be games that you can't win, unfortunately, based on how they draw.
They're there, yeah.
Yeah,
but
which
Mitch,
is
can you tell us for the audience, because there's probably people out there who are like, but how? What's the approach? What's the approach to beating slimes here? Because Taylor was, I think, just starting to get into it, but I want to hear from Mitch.
So a lot of it depends upon your opening hand, obviously, from the player draw. So if you don't get the high roll where you just, all right, turn 1, no baby gray, or if they do have baby gray, you guys spawn slam.
Yeah.
If you slam, you have slam. Yeah, you have slam. A lot of what I do is I resume the control role in the matchup. So my goal in the first 2 turns is to amass influence and then set up safety nets to not die. So I'll level the 1 aggressively, level 2 aggressively. Level the 2 is important because it lets you set up a bigger board wipe into their level 3 turn. So you can clear out ethereal slimes with buff counters on them. You can kill other bigger slimes as well as clean up the board. And then just making sure you can find your counter spells, find your water barriers to stop their storm slimes. If you have time to get Safeguard Amulet out, helps a lot there too. And then towards the end of the game, you just go off with a big loss of thought and then drown them in card advantage and win the game.
Yep. That's about right. There's some interesting decision making, I think, that happens in the slime matchup with when you activate Polaris, because I found usually in the slime matchup, some games will present you with kind of like 2 different points where you want to think about using Polaris most commonly. One of them tends to be the turn they level to 2 to try and deny them drawing a card off of the level 2. And then another tends to be when they level to 3 to, hopefully you've gotten to level 2 and you have enough counters on there to be able to like blow up an ethereal slime in response to its trigger or something. And I mean, there are some other scenarios too, where if they just like get a big baby red down earlier and you're like, I got to stop that thing right away. That's reasonable too. Do you have any sage wisdom, or how did you tend to use Polaris in these matchups?
So I think I only ever used it once to deny a level 2 draw. And that's because they're already on low influence. but I don't think the value of denying them one draw and then doing like one or two slimes, the weak ones off the board, is worth giving the board up.
Mm-hmm.
I would hold Polaris for as long as I could. I would use Torrential Blasts, I would use Reflecting Missiles, and just hold the board over their head because it forces them to try and play slower, which is what I want.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found the only time I ever wanted to activate it into like a level 2 effect was if they already had like 3 or 4 slimes on the board and it was presenting just a ton of damage anyway.
Yeah.
And you kind of need to at that point then. But yeah, otherwise you want to hold it.
Yep.
Yeah, I envision, I mean, I've had the times I've used it, it's been, there have been like 2 baby grays and a baby red out or something. And it's really hard to turn down the value of removing all that damage and stopping them from drawing the card. And it does depend on what your hand looks like too. And Mitch, you mentioned like when you see slam, you slam. I definitely had a strategy throughout the weekend where I would definitely do that turn 2. I would,
yes.
If I'm feeling really spicy, I would do it turn 3. But beyond that, I would put slam in memory most of the time. In a lot of
100% agree with that. If it's not my first turn of having a slam, I wouldn't slam. It's just you go 2 shields down in order to get damage through, which is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep shields up until we can kill you.
Mm-hmm. There are a couple of matchups like Luxem where you kind of can just freely slam. Yeah. That's fine. But in any matchup where they're presenting any amount of pressure towards you, it's just too risky to do it beyond the early turns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even if they aren't like going to kill you in response, if they just do enough damage, if it leaves them an opening to do enough damage to where you can't come back into the game and stabilize, that's just as good as killing you, right? So
yep, agreed.
Yeah, it is. You have to play the deck as a control deck. You have to be thinking about you need to remain in control, and as enticing as slam can be in the mid to late game, unless you've done the thing where you've built out the 13, 15 card hand and you can go, cool, I can slam and hold 6 cards up still.
Yeah, we did that.
that slam away, my friend. Go for it. But otherwise, until you've reached that point, it's usually decks will see you do that and go, okay, you're dead now. And that's you just can't ever let control actually slip out of your hands. It's especially true. Like I played a ton of fire aggro, like I said, and that is a matchup where you need to be answering things every single turn and preparing for what's happening next turn. Like your water barriering Gildas attacks because you're just like, I just can't take that much damage this turn.
Yep.
And that's always really fun too, because sometimes they have to decide, well, I could break the barrier, but then the Gildas only does 1 damage.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually like such a nice play in this deck, just sidetracking off the slimes quick, because you stay like resource neutral when you do that. Like it's just a free prevent 3, prevent 4 damage.
Right.
Since water barrier has floating memory. Like normally I'm trying to like hold my water barriers up for a while. It took a little while to get into the mindset of like, oh no, this is just totally free for me to do right now. Yeah. So just throw it away. Cause you're not actually throwing anything away. But getting back to slimes, kind of one of the other strategies we had going into that was we had Blinding Orb and Quicksilver Grail in the sideboard as well, just to kind of help pressure and keep their level 3 turn under control. That plus negates like really lets you stop a lot of what they're doing. Mitch, though, I don't think you weren't actually even bringing in Quicksilver Grail for those matchups. Is that correct?
That's correct. So I think I did it once in day 2 before top 8, and I really liked the results. So then in top 8, I never brought in Grail. I only brought in Orb. Reason why is I wanted to be able to, if I was going first, turn 1, being able to play down a fractal or 2, and then still being able to bring out the ring, crack the ring to grab slam. Because if I'm playing down 2 fractals turn 1, I can't grab backup charger to get up to that enough influence to do a slam.
Right.
And I would rather be able to have the out to just get a quick Iceman out of the way and try and like just high roll a slime to the start, and not to try and have this late game dance with them around how many storm slimes do they have.
It was day 2 that Steve-O decided to bring in Quicksilver and Blinding into the main, just expecting to play a bunch of slimes. And to be fair, Steve-O won the scrub out event.
Yeah. So it worked.
I'm still hesitant about that because that, like you said, Mitch, sometimes you just your optimal line is to put down a lot of cards turn one when you see the double fractal, and especially if you're on the fragmented play, so you have the ability to kind of like dig and potentially find a second fractal rain more easily.
Yep.
That I just don't want to turn off the ability to actually get that slam off on the next turn.
Yeah. Yep. Steve was, I think, playing just Spirit of Water in that event too. I don't think he played.
Yeah, he was listening. He was listening to my dumb ideas.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, that helps with that plan of playing Grail over Ring, though, because you always have that extra card then.
Yep.
So this is like just another thing you have to take into consideration as you're trying to pick up the deck is, am I going to have enough cards to actually like keep influence up throughout the game if I'm trying to get like kind of cheeky with these Grail plays, like hiding an orb or hiding, maybe you're going to play Lantern now for the mirror or something, or hiding Safeguard Amulet, what have you, right? All things you want to put under a Grail, but you got to make sure you still have like the influence to be able to like slam turn 2 or, keep up stuff on turn 3 after making some plays, anything like that. So
I think just in general, there's an important discussion about the importance of influence with this deck. Like the deck really, I mean, I've said it a couple times with Lost in Thought, but the deck is really about having the influence to have control over the game. You simply can't control a game of Grand Archive without having significant influence, cards in hand and cards in memory, and the fractals in play counting as it and everything.
It's almost like that's why they named the combination of your cards in memory and your hand influence.
Your influence.
It's
over
weird
the
how
game.
that works.
It's crazy. Yeah. What a weird coincidence.
Yeah.
But
wild.
It really was how why I went to just the regular Spirit into Scrubbed Out event as well. Because I really, really wanted to have both Crimson and Viridian trinkets in my deck for the Scrub Out event. And I was glad I did too. They both played a role that day. But I just said, on day 2 here, I'm just going to take the gamble on the top of my deck and take the extra influence instead, rather than digging.
Which,
although I did miss the Spirit Shard a few times. Played so much Fire Aggro, I was like, I kind of wish I had a second shard to turn on my Awakened Deacons.
yes, that's a big thing. So I think like our deck has enough turn 1 plays where not having Fractured Spirit is fine. Because there's a very rare chance you'll miss your Fractal Arraigns or your Polar Depths or a Slam or just some kind of turn 1 play. Yeah, but again, just having extra Fantasia for your Deacons or to turn on your Mirror faster. So it's a toss-up either way.
Deacon into Primordial Ritual was another line that I really like to see. That was a good early game line, especially if they just like kill it because they just want to get it out of the way and sick. That works really well. But overall, like I was totally fine that day 2, obviously with the Spirit of Water, but I also day 1 ran, did our strategy with Fragmented and the regular Spirit of Water and swap them a little bit based on the position of the match. So I don't know, Mitch, do you want to talk about why we chose? That's the big thing. It says everywhere in Fractal Insight, our list is the Fragmented / regular Watermill Arisanna. So let's
good old Maindeck spice.
Let's just talk about why we went with that hybridization for this event.
Yeah. So if you break it down, it comes down to really easy. Do we do this or that? Obviously, there's some matchup specifics where you want to do just one no matter what. But the idea is if we're on the play, we're going first. We'll grab Fracture Eyes. It'll just help us set up a better turn 1 play of playing down hopefully 2 fractals if we can find them. And then trying to find like an Icebound Slam for the follow-up turn. Also gives us that Fantasia, which will help our Deacons get on faster. Which will also help us turn on our Mirrors faster as well.
Crystalline Mirror, yep.
Yeah, Crystalline Mirror. And then late game, if we get lucky enough and we get a +1 level herb from leveling up, we'll get that card back anyways. But and on the draw,
a lot of the time you get the level herb, but not always. And importantly, we cut Ingredient Pouch. That was something that some of the lists were running too. And we did a lot of testing again with a lot of different material deck setups. And we ultimately just found Ingredient Pouch didn't matter enough.
Yep. No, I think the list that we decided upon without ingredient pouch is fine. I can see if you don't want level 2 Ari at all, ingredient pouch you should put in just to help get your Polaris up to a higher count. Mm-hmm. Then also in a long grinding controller game, when you have that ingredient pouch every turn, just giving you more value, I can see that being good too.
I think we just won the grindy games though by Lost in Thought for 5. It felt superfluous to have the ingredient pouch in there. It was slow to actually get value from it, and the only time I wanted it was when I went through both levels and didn't hit a +1 level herb on the fragmented start. And that was like too many layers of like specific scenario for me to go, oh, I really need to spend a material deck slot on this one card.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, we started fragmented.
Yeah, and then if you're on the draw, we just go normal spirit so we can slam them turn 1.
Yep.
Easy enough.
There was some talk about in the water matchups, and I think we went back and forth about which ones to bring out. But Taylor, do you want to talk a little bit about how we chose spirits against water specifically?
Yeah. So against water, a lot of it was just like wanting more raw influence. Like that's how you win that matchup, is just having more cards and being the last person with something to do. So oftentimes we just went regular spirit regardless of whether we were on the player draw. You're probably not losing that quickly in that matchup anyway, because both players are going to be keeping up a lot of resources to fight each other. No one's really going to be like going for a dive kill on turn 2 or 3, because like if it doesn't work, and it's very likely to not work, your game is going to be miserable after that. So just staying normal spirit and getting that extra card is super valuable there. Fragmented, like it's nice to get a turn 1, or I guess it'd be a turn 2 slam, because you're going to do fragmented on the play normally, set up your turn 2 slam. But like turn 2 is actually like kind of too late in the water mirror to be slamming. Like if you don't get it turn 1, you kind of need to wait till you have like 13, 15 cards before you can slam again. So it just really doesn't matter if you find it off of fragmented or not. So very much just regular.
We had an early discussion where we were saying just go fragmented against water because slam was too big of a risk when they have things like Song of Frost to just shut it down. But then I think we played you and I had that the night before we played the water mirror a little bit and discussed it again. And we were like, here's the thing. You're going to try to kill them and be 1 card short of paying for the title lock. Yep. Let's just make sure we have the extra card.
Yes.
Let's just go raw water, because you want it too often. It comes down to who can pay for the title locks first to win the game. And we just wanted to be able to do that.
Yep, exactly. The water mirror is just like miserable to play regardless. Like it's a hugely skill intensive matchup. The better player is going to win that like 9 times out of 10. Like you have to get incredibly unlucky to not be able to like skill your way out of that matchup, I think. And seeing more cards and being able to like have more influence is how you utilize your skill properly in that matchup. So
you have to like you really want to resolve the Lost in Thought for 4 or 5.
Yep.
But to resolve the Lost in Thought for 4 or 5 is already a task. To find the right spot to time it, because they're going to try and counter it, that means you have to already be at like minimum 8 influence if you're trying to get the 5 off. But if they're holding double title lock and you go for the Lost in Thought for 5, like they're going to be tempted to double title lock that, because it's going to win you the game if it doesn't.
I would if I was on their side.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would
have to.
Yeah, you can't let them have 5 free influence.
Yep. So since we're kind of trying to wrap up, do we want to go over the rest of the matchups or how we thought the matchups went that weekend? We talked a lot about slimes, which I think is the correct one to talk about a lot of, because slimes is still like big guy on campus, I think. But like Fire Merlin is seeing less play now, but I think for the most part, we were pretty happy with our Fire Merlin matchup. Especially if they weren't running Ascension. I think if they're not running Ascension, they just have a really hard time actually racing you. They can sit on level 2 and try and like control your graveyard a bit and eat your floating memory and get some value there. But like that just gives you infinite time to set up then.
So interestingly, in the regional results we've been seeing, Merlin has been doing pretty okay against to well against the deck. And I think a lot of that really comes down to how explosive your start is with Ari.
Yes.
Like the water Ari deck can just win against anything. Like we said, this is why we took this deck. It can just have the start where it goes, you're not going to win this. Like you need a god hand to beat me. If your start is just kind of like a slow Fractal of Rain and the Merlin gets to just DG to level 2, which is the correct thing to do in a lot of scenarios. I want to be really clear about that.
Yes,
it's very good.
You should be DGing to 2, especially if there's an opportunity like against this deck or something. They can, if all you're doing is slowly milling cards, they can eat you up really good.
Yep. Yeah. And so that's what I'm going to say next is that if they have Ascension, like that gives them the way to burst you out.
Yep.
And like that's what you really need to be like worried about. If they aren't running Ascensions, like you can kind of just chill. If they're running Ascensions, they now have a way to like effectively race you after kind of sitting at level 2 or even not sitting at level 2. If they just go to level 2, eat one of your floating memory and get to level 3, get that free draw, that's insane. They're in a really good spot with an Ascension at that point. So you really need to like lean on your Fracturizes and like hit their swords pretty heavily with those. And
Crystalline
really
Mirror
are
for
looking
sword is also a really good play. Just to like you need to make it so that they have to spend an extra turn materializing a sword before they can go off on you. If you just let, I mean, this is what I always do, so I'm very well experienced in this category. If you just let Merlin do all of the Merlin things without trying to stop them at any point, she is just going to run over the deck for sure. But at the end of the day, that's a dumb thing to say because it's a control deck. Yeah, if you don't control what your opponent is doing, you're not going to win.
Yep. And it's actually like, surprisingly difficult to control what Merlin's doing when she's got like fast speed interaction like that and fast speed plays. I think we didn't play. I don't know if we ever played a Wind Merlin variant, but I think that's probably even more favorable than Fire Merlin. Because even if they have Ascension in that case, because they just don't actually have the burst at that point to end the game.
I would agree with that. Any deck that what we found definitely was any deck that would just kind of was screwing around doing things that felt somewhat fair was not a threat for this deck.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Nico, I think that highly depends on the variant of Nico. If they're playing the Tenoris Nico version, I think that's actually pretty nice for Mill to play into. They don't have anywhere near as much pressure as the Sylvie Nico variant. So you have a lot more time to just sculpt the game to what you want.
I think across the weekend, a lot of us played that matchup a few times. I know I played it at least once and other people played it. And the way it always felt, and in testing and in the real world, was that Nico just never had the turns to actually get set up. By the time Nico could play any of the regalia that actually caused a problem for you, because things like the shield do make it harder for your stratagem to kill. Magebane Lash does make it harder for stratagem to kill also. But she just usually lost the game before she got to that point because you had too many ways of putting pressure on or just straight milling her out, and she can't counter mill you as well.
Yep. Yeah, and even if they play Nullifying Lantern and get it fracturized, it's still really hard for them to actually like counter mill you because you still have Polaris to put bolts into your deck to survive one more turn.
Exactly.
And now all of a sudden you have a million floating in your graveyard to hit a huge stratagem with. So like it's just really hard for her to like interact with you at all. Playing Sylvie, I think actually kind of flips that on its head a little bit.
Agreed.
To the point where I think that matchup actually feels slightly unfavorable. And now all of a sudden she's got extra pressure. She's got like turtles that have Spell Shroud and are very large hitting you and lots of other ways to get like buff counters and stuff. Seaside Ringleader is very powerful in that matchup. And now all of a sudden you're feeling a lot more pressure. And I think the Sylvie variants are also more likely to bring out Lantern too. And so like just so many more angles of attack that feel almost like targeted towards the mill deck.
Torrential Blast can't kill Terrapin. That's actually like a huge and frustrating thing.
Yes. And if they go to Nico, all of a sudden you can. But if they're going to Nico, they're probably killing you with Nico fairly shortly anyway.
They're leveling and ravishing that turn.
A pretty small consolation. Yep. So yeah, I think that matchup highly depends on the level one involved, but it's anywhere from favorable to unfavorable, and that's another like really skill dependent matchup. You can totally if you're playing against a Sylvie Nico player that's worse than you, you can totally outskill them. But if you're not as good as they are, or like a Tenoris Nico player, they'll probably beat the heck out of you. So you still have to play well and know what your outs are and what your lines are and stuff. So
definitely.
Wind allies, we've talked about that one's incredibly favorable. I think it's so hard for them to actually like get a foothold in the matchup. Water allies is going to take that and flip it on its head again, where they can fracturize a lantern and make your life really difficult. They also have Scepter of Lumina as another angle of attack to pressure your life total.
The burst potential is higher, and it's not all ally based because you can hold up a bunch of interaction for allies. You can hold up your blasts, you can hold up your refracting missiles, and you can just revitalizing cleanse and heal a lot of damage. But the water one pushes ally damage, and then this like scepter nonsense that happens means like they put out the poison dagger if they're playing the assassin version, and then you have to put out your safeguard and try and prevent that, and then they're free to just scepter you next turn or something after you get them to pop it. And yeah, it's just it's a lot more pressure, and that's how you beat a control deck.
Yep, exactly. And Fire Aggro, we also talked about. That's a pretty simple matchup as well, and it feels very favorable for the mill deck just because you have so many answers to what they're doing, and as soon as they run out of gas, they're out of gas.
Yeah.
If they didn't burst you in the first few turns, that game is pretty much won. Especially with Revitalizing Cleanse to like really put you out of reach.
I've cleansed for 10, and it should just go, the opponent should
game over
at that point.
Yes, at that point it's done. Yep.
And then finally, Razor Gale is the last kind of big one here. That one felt pretty favorable for the most part. The way they beat you is like seeing a bunch of Razor Gales very early and being able to play them. Although I think as Mill has become more popular, I think this matchup is actually going to get a lot more difficult. Previously, Razor Gale was not playing any hate at all for the deck. They weren't playing Lanterns. They weren't playing Scatter Essence. They weren't playing Mystic Purifier. And they can play all of those very, very well. And also Cleansing Reunion. At which point I really don't...
Vertigus Decree too, right?
They were playing... A lot of them were playing some amount of Vertigress somewhere. 1 to 3.
And all those cards make your life more difficult as the mill player to the point where I think that matchup starts to become pretty unfavorable if they want to tech against it.
I'll say in particular, too, going into the new meta, starting with Ascent Utrecht and forward, we're going to have ALC Alter Edition. And it does look like the addition of Vanitas level 3 is going to potentially create a new variant of the Razor Gale deck that is, I'm going to predict is going to be stronger against Mill than the Kongming one, because you have the addition of the extra level, the extra punch, the extra just push of damage on top of an additional 12 life total to get through, which puts your combo off a little bit farther to be able to get the kill on. So yeah, I agree. I think right now going to this, I wasn't too worried about the matchup unless they drew like Logan did. But if they don't draw like Logan did, then that matchup felt fairly easy to take down. But I think it's going to be different.
Yeah. A lot of them started playing like Nullifying Mirror for the mirror, the Kongming Razor Gale mirror match too. And that also is something that's going to strike off your Revitalizing Cleanse, which is one of your best cards in that matchup. So like if they were already teched for the mirror, how many more times can I say mirror? They are going to be in really good shape against the mill matchup as well. So that's something else that you got to kind of keep an eye out for.
Shout out again to Degis, who he's playing Fiza and brought in the mirror to stop my Revitalizing Cleanse. And then he got really sad when at end of turn I fracturized it, and he was like, oh no.
Oh no.
Wow. And then so dirty.
Recollection, Revitalizing for 10.
Yeah. Scoop it up next game.
Yeah.
Listen, he respected. He respected.
He did.
That's what you got to play.
Stuff.
He's a good player.
Yep.
I want to mention Wind Ari.
Yeah, Wind Ari.
Yes. Yep.
I did play that one time. The current, it was actually tough. It was a 2-1 win for me, and I would hinge that largely on my opponent not knowing this deck and not knowing it was a thing. But Wind Ari has been putting up better numbers than some people might expect against this list so far in the regionals too. It just, you can't quite water barrier your way through that many cosmic bolts.
Yeah. And it's not even like that. Yeah. It's not even that. It's the fact that once they get to level 3 and have Astral Seal, that like shuts down a lot of your deck for free. I played against this matchup a lot against Corbin and Stevo as we were testing, getting ready for Santa Clara. And if you can't like kill them before 3, the game kind of flips on their head. You've got to like kill them that turn essentially. And they can start packing Scatter Essence as well, which plays right into their game plan of just turbo to 3 and disrupt you. And at that point, it just becomes like a fight against time. Like you've got to find enough threats to overcome all of their Astral Seals. Otherwise, you'll lose the long game.
Yep.
Yeah. And Tristan. We didn't talk about Tristan.
Yep.
But Tristan is very favored for Water Ari.
Yeah. And that felt like as long as like the Water Ari didn't, overextend, it feels like a free roll. That's another one where like all these win decks, I keep bringing up that like these are all going to be decks that can tech for this deck, I think, quite a bit and play really well. We've already seen Tristan's in the past play like Grail, and they can totally Grail Lantern on top of playing Scatter Essence really well. Again, like same way Windari does. They can play Vertigus Decree, which was fine there. Cleansing Reunion if they really want to extra hate you out. So like lots of options to target the mill deck and make that a much better matchup, because they're totally fine like just like kind of killing you slowly with Tristan and Shadows. They don't need to hit you with a big Shadow Strike that you can Song of Frost. So
yeah, the Shadow Strike definitely, I think that route becomes a liability against Ari, and if they can't just close it really early with a Slice and Dice, if they're only relying on Shadow Strike, they're not going to get there.
Yep,
you'll always have the answer of some kind. But yeah, I think that's most of them. I did play against Luxem. We talked about one time I had an epic draw against Once in Love fellow caster. That was a lot of fun. I had 3 Icebounds and he only had 2 Underfires. I jammed out. I was like, Icebound, Underfire, damn it. Icebound, Underfire, damn it. Icebound, I got you that time. Anyway, that's a silly matchup though. You just kind of do the thing, and then if you draw the right cards, they lose, and then it works pretty well I think it's pretty Ari favored also.
Yep, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that's most of the meta though, right? That's
yes.
We mentioned everything. So do you guys have any last bits of parting wisdom before we close this one out? I hope this is a useful deep dive for everyone.
Yeah. One thing for Slimes players going forward, put Lantern in your sideboard. Just put it
please, people you need to run Lantern in some, even though it only is like a small hurdle sometimes, depending on how this works out or whatever. You got to start putting Lantern in because we brought this deck because we looked at the Lantern percentages and we're like,
they're not great.
Nobody's gonna. So few people are gonna have Lantern, and almost nobody's gonna put it under a Quicksilver. And the only thing we were actually concerned about was an early Quicksilver with a Lantern under it.
Yes,
that is a lot to get through for the deck.
Yeah, I think it's not just mill that Lantern's good against. Random Fire aggro decks are still running around. It plays perfectly fine there. They rely a lot on fire cards in the graveyard. And even Kong Ming wants to cyclical breeze back whatever win cards Kong Ming's playing. So it has value throughout the metagame still. I don't know why at what point we're like, Lantern isn't needed anymore. I mean, I do know it was Slime. Slimes became dominant, and Lantern really doesn't do much against Slimes unless you're like really worried about Slime Eruption and King Slime. But other than that, that was kind of it. So bring it. It's time for it to come back.
Yeah, I think
we're back to the good
day
old days
2.
Now.
Only one of the Slime players had Lantern out of the 6.
Yep, and look what happened. So. Bring your Lanterns, slot them up. I think that is hopefully a really useful deep dive for a lot of people who are looking at this deck. Again, we still think this is going to be a contender. This is something that we're specifically preparing to see as a major force in the metagame in the next couple of Ascents. It's a good deck. It has a lot of good matchups. It has tech against it, but it still can win through that tech. We'll see how heavily people start teching against it, because there's certainly a point where it takes a hit. But yeah, love this deck. Congratulations to Mitch, Taylor, and Kinship on the team for their performance today. They all did wonderful. And then huge shout out just in general to Maindeck team, Corbin, Braden, Logan, Steve. We had just a bunch of support along with Kinship and who am I forgetting?
Gage.
Yes, and Gage as well.
There's also, I mean, we might as well just list everybody off because we're leaving like 3 people off at this point.
So
like, you know,
Devin,
also
Tony.
It's a
David,
long list.
Yep. Adam. Now I need to make sure I'm not missing anybody for sure.
Yeah, see, that was the problem. You should just let me call, and then they could get mad at me if I forgot to say their name.
No.
But now you've gone in.
Yeah, we're cutting it off here, and everybody who didn't get named, just send Dan some angry DMs.
That's fine. Yeah, I have thick skin. I can handle that. But thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. And also check out, like I said, check out the deck profile. If for some reason you watched all this and now you decided, okay, fine, I'll go look at the deck profile, go do that. Check out True Champions deck profile as well for their take on it as well. Get all that info absorbed into your brain and then have fun playing this deck. The deck that caused me to start buying Arisanna CSRs, because the deck is wonderful. Arisanna is great now. I love this. So much fun. Thank you, Taylor and Mitch, for joining me today. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. Keep playing Grand Archive, and we'll see you in the next one.